Hey everyone, this is Sean. So today I want to show you how to use Supabase like a pro, like an actual technical founder, even if you don't come from a computer science background. And I'll show you the main 6 use cases that I use every single day when I'm trying to build my startup that I would believe would cover 99% of the chances where you're going to use Supabase to support your front-end application as a backend and as a, people call it backend as a service. Okay. If this is the first time to hear about this product, this is one of the most popular backend / database software tool out there on the market for vibe coders, for startup builders, and it's just gaining more popularity. I know a lot of people have this shame of not coming from a technical background. Even if that's the case, it doesn't matter. Okay, so cool, let's get started. So this is a Kanban board, which is a board with a bunch of lists of tasks to do, and then you can just sort of move around these to-do lists into different stages, from to-do to in progress to done to failed. And the reason why I chose to use this example is because it showcases quite a lot of very interesting use cases. Number one is that you're using login. Number two, there's a user-based scenario here. Like let's say right now I'm using a different account. And then these are 2 completely different users. Supabase can enable you to handle that, and they're not like even linked to each other. And then the third thing is that when you have, say, the same user, let's say I create another browser over here with the same account, and if I pull one card to another one, it should be automatically updated, right? If I pull this one back here, shall be automatically updated. Don't think this is like happens magically. There's something behind it that we're using in Supabase to support this kind of front-end features. And last but not least, there are features such as, if I move, say, one item, say wash my dishes, to done, I can receive a notification, say, okay, I washed my dishes, it's done, right? This is called an EdgeFunction that I'll show you later. All right, so following these use cases, let's break it down into how we're supporting such use cases with Supabase. Let's jump back to the code. Okay, so the first thing is, by the way, if you want to use this code, I put everything here called shenshangchen/yt/supabase/tips/Kanban. Okay, and then I listed down the top 6 use cases over here. And we're going to follow this flow to explain them one by one so that eventually you'll be able to use all those features that I just showed you. Okay. The first one is authentication with OAuth. I already explained quite a bit in many of my previous videos. Feel free to watch them. But essentially, it's about like if I just sign out here, I can sign back in with Google. Yeah, just sign back in with my Google account. With a bit of slow internet, but it's all good. Loading my boards. Yeah, that's it. The way you do it is basically in your Supabase. Let's just jump right in. In your Supabase, if you go to your sidebar and go to your authentication and go to your sign-in providers, and you scroll down, and over here you can turn on your Google login credentials, and then you'll be able to set up everything. Feel free to watch my previous video for this one. It's very powerful. You don't need to write a bunch of backend code for this. But to avoid repetition, I'll jump right into the second use case. The second one is called a RowLevel security, RLS. Okay, it's very, very useful because think about how like when you use some applications like Notion or Slack or anything, you can always log in with multiple accounts, right? I'm using Notion, my mom can use Notion, but Notion themselves don't really have like a breakthrough where like I can see my mom's data, my mom can see my data unless we share with each other. So in this case, it's using a technology called RowLevel security. I'll show you how it works and when it would not work if I remove some parts of the features, right? So the way we do it is that let me show you back in the Supabase. Okay, I'm just going to cross this out. Actually, go to dashboard and go to my projects. It's this one. And I just go to my tables. So if you see, like right now, I have 3 data tables. I can show you the schema if you click on the sidebar and check database, all right? So right now how it works is that if a user logs in, you have an auth.user.id, and that's linked to the table called boards, and board has a user ID that's linked to your authentication. And then every board's ID is linked to the list ID. The list is basically every list here. To do, in progress, and done. That's another table recording it. And it has its own list ID and board ID linked to which board it was storing the list with. So for example, in this case, the board is belonging to this account, right? But in this case, this board, which is completely different, let's say I can add like failed, right? This is a completely different account, so there's no failed here. These two boards share different board IDs, okay? And then eventually, every list has a list ID that connects to every card. So every card lives in every list, okay? This is how the basic data structure looks like in our current code base. And if we go back to the code, you can find it in my Supabase _ schema database.sql. You can copy the whole thing to create tables using these SQL, okay? But how does row-level security policy works? If I go back to Supabase, go to the sidebar, turn on table editor, you can see that for every table, I have this thing called auth policies over here, right? Doesn't matter what table it is. There's an auth policy over here. If I click on it, you can see that, for example, for boards, what I'm doing is that I'm allowing a public role who is a user to be able to delete their own boards, insert into their own boards, update anything, or select anything. So let's do an experiment. If I disable the RLS right here, right now. My internet is quite slow, but it's okay. Go back to table editor. You see, if it's disabled, it says RLS disabled. And here it also says disabled. I'm just going to disable every single one of them to show you what it means. Okay, second one, the third one. Okay, cool. So if I come back here, let me just make it so easy for you guys to see. After I disabled it, if I just refresh, Command R, you see like the cards disappeared for this account. And it goes back to like this random welcome to Kanban board, drag and drop cards, real-time updates. And I believe it's because like when I initialized this whole project, these three things already existed. But then when I created another account and created their own cards, they are linked to this specific user ID. And because I disabled the row-level security policies, now I, as Sasha, couldn't jump in and see my cards anymore, right? So the way to do it is that you must turn them back on, enable RLS. Let's do this. I'll show you what policies, how to create these policies, and what policies there are, and why they're important in a bit. Let me just finish this experiment with you to show you the importance of this, okay? So let's jump back in a little bit. So we were talking about cards. If you see like every card has a card ID, if you still remember, and they have a title, what these cards are, like I need to go to home soon, I need to drag and drop cards, real-time updates, all these kind of things. With a description, and there's a list ID, there's a position. So all of these things, like if you see like there's a little link here, this card ID is linked to this list ID, which links you back to this list table. One of the list ID is here. So let's find out. List ID, copy it, come back to list, Command FV. You see, it links to this list, and this list is linked to this board, okay? If we copy that board ID and come to boards, Command FV, you see, that list is living in this board, okay? So now that we have enabled all these policies, and let's come back and then Command R to refresh it. You see our cards is back. Well, this is just the original one. All right, but anyways, you get the idea. The idea is that the RLS policy allows you to very strictly to restrict who has access to what kind of data. And if I go back to my GitHub, So basically, the users will be able to see their own boards, lists, and cards. And there's a database level security because I won't be able to see anybody else's data, right? And there's a thing called multi-tenant architecture ready. So that means that multi-tenant, a tenant is like someone lives in an apartment, but now the apartment is your app, and multiple people can log into your app to have access to their own data, right? And how did we do this? So if you go back to this code base, by the way, feel free to clone the link that I showed you earlier. If you go to Supabase schema, when you initialize this project, instead of just downloading the code, you will be able to see this database.sql, and then you're going to copy the whole thing into your Supabase SQL. So if I'll show you Command A, Command C, copy it, come to Supabase, come to the sidebar, click on SQL editor. Okay, click on this plus button, create a new snippet, and just paste the whole thing here and do Command Enter. Right? I already created all of these things, so it will just be a repetition for me. But let's take a look at what we actually have in this thing to create these policies. So initially, of course, I'm going to create these 3 tables, right? Boards, list, and cards. Create the table if they don't exist, right? And there's this ID, user ID, right? And then for list, there's a list ID and then board ID connected to it, as we explained, okay? If I just like scroll down, you can see that at line 35, there's enable RowLevel security. That's the thing that we're talking about. We were basically altering all these tables that we just created to enable their RowLevel security, right? This is basically telling Supabase to turn this button on, right? To enable it instead of disable it, okay? And then you are defining the actual policies for them, all right? So let's look at the policies for boards first, all right? So for boards, I have actually 4 policies right here, right? So what I'm saying is that for select using auth user ID equals user ID, what does that mean? That means anybody who logged in with Supabase, they have an authorization user ID. If that's equal to the user ID stored in your boards table, then this user particularly can see that board. So let's come back to the table. What we mean is that for this board, there's a board ID, there's a user ID, as long as the current user who logged in, which is here in authentication, as long as the current user who logged in, I'm going to copy this user ID here, okay? As long as this user here, come back here to board table, Command FV, you see? As long as that user logged in and that user ID equals to this user ID column here, this user can see this board. That's what it means, okay? Yeah, that's what it means. Same thing for every single one of them. So that means that user is able to view, insert new rows, update any rows, or delete any rows. If you copy this and paste into your SQL editor in Supabase, you have these policies. Simple as that, very simple, okay? And then you can always come back here to your tables, click on the auth policies, and edit any single one of them. You see, it's the same thing. Alter the policy of this with the public table called boards, as long as the user ID in the board table equals to the authentication user ID, you'll be able to delete this row as this user. That's it. And you can click on save if you finish. All right, I won't update anything here. So this is very, very powerful because, like, imagine you have, I don't know, 1 million users. There's probably a better infrastructure for that. But if you have like 200 users and maybe they're all enterprise users and you're already hitting an annual recurring revenue of $1 million by having 100, 200 users, then this comes very handy. You're doing like a data separation for every single user, right? So make sure you use ROL's policy when setting up a Supabase project. Okay, cool. Let's start explaining the second thing. Already the third thing actually. Come back to GitHub. The first one was user authentication. Second one was RowLevel security. The third one is called real-time subscriptions. So do you remember that when we were moving cards around, the other window with the same user logged in will be able to get like that real-time updates. Let me show you one more time. This is two different users, right? Different email accounts. But if I do, let's use the same account again, right? And if I just like move one of them to done, because my internet is a little slow, but yeah, it moves to done immediately, right? So if I say in progress, let's say I am preparing a new video for Supabase use cases that cover 99% of the cases, all right? Hit add card. Yeah, this one updated real time. Okay, so that's called a real-time listening, or your code is sort of fetching information whenever something changed in the database because of the user did something or because the backend changed something. Okay, I'll show you how it works. Let's come back to the code one more time. I think these are irrelevant. For the real time, it's in, by the way, let me show you the structure of the code a little bit. So here you have an app router and the components folder, right? The components folder saved like the login form and then the board. And then the app folder shows you the directory, right? You have authentication callbacks, and this is just images and how you define how it looks, and the layout of the page with the authentication provider that makes sure that your entire app is wrapped around that login space. And then the page, this is your main page. If you're still logging in, the loading will be true and it will show you that it's loading. After you logged in, if the user exists, it's going to show you, if the user has logged in, it will show you the Kanban board. Otherwise, it will show you the login form, right? Let's do command click into the Kanban board. All right, it's living in the components. So right now, I'm going to show you how does real-time works, okay? So let's check this default Kanban board export, right? So at the top, we're obviously using a user auth to let people log in. And then there's a bunch of state management. That's not relevant. What's relevant is, let's come to line 39, all right? Initialize app, data plus real time. So the way it works is that, firstly, I'm gonna have this use effect. Use effect, for those of you who are not familiar with React, is that whenever something in this changes, run everything here, right? So basically, like on Instagram, if you click on like, then they must update that to the database, and then people who followed you, who turned on, I don't know, like maybe YouTube, right? If your favorite YouTuber launched a new video, right? If you click on that bell, then you will receive notifications, right? Because something changed, so run something. That's what use effect does, okay? So this is basically saying when the user changes, run this. If the user logged in, fetch the entire data, and then set up the real-time subscription, okay? And this function, already written well for you, is the very key of this entire real-time listening, all right? So set up real-time subscription. What it does is that it set up things like the following, if you take a look. Create a constant called subscription, which is using the Supabase client that we defined. I'll show you where we defined it. Supabase is imported from a library called Supabase. If we click into that, it's right here, library Supabase, okay? And then this is a Supabase that we're using, is a client that has access to your secret and keys, okay? So let's come back here to kanbanboard.tsx. So with setup real-time subscriptions, you will be able to do supabase.channel Kanban changes. As long as the table changes, the Postgres, well, Postgres is the SQL thing that Supabase uses. As long as it changes, it will basically help you to fetch the new information to the front end. That's what real-time listening does, okay? So let's see. Basically, if it's a public table, all right, if it's boards, lists, or cards, as long as they're on change, right? You see the same code. Send the payload, console log it, and then fetch the new data about it, right? So what it means, like, why is this important? Because traditionally, what we can do is the following. Traditionally, if somebody did something like this, okay, the same user, let's say on a different computer who logged in the same account, will receive this if we refresh the data fetching every 5 seconds, something like that. But that's wasting a lot of resources. Why? Because maybe like for the entire day, I'm not using this board at all, correct? I only need to refresh it when somebody changes the database. When somebody, let's say myself, moved that I'm preparing a video and I say I'm done. When I change that, I want all these 3 tables to be updated so that whoever is logged in with the same account, let's say myself in a different country at a different time, when I turn it on, I'll be able to see the real-time updates. So you see, like we're saving so much calculation or computation resources here. Instead of refreshing every 5 seconds, it refreshes by request. Okay, that's the powerful part of using a real-time listening. If your app is scaling up, you're going to save so much money by doing this. And also, if your app is a very user engagement or like multi-user or like you need to log into different accounts at the same time kind of use cases, it's very handy. Okay, try to use this thing. So I'm going to see if I have shown you everything about real-time. So yeah, basically just these 2 things. So you see, I explained how we define the function, set out real-time subscription, all right? And at the end, you got to do a cleanup. So what the cleanup does is that once it finishes, we got to turn it off. Because otherwise it keeps listening and then listening. I mean, like it's like a socket. You plug into your electricity socket and then you're using electricity, right? Whenever the changes are done, right? You see like there's a timeout, small delay to avoid conflicts with optimistic delays, and this subscribe. After that, it's going to return a cleanup. And then you're going to unsubscribe this subscription until the next time a user comes in and changed something, and then we're going to turn this back on. Okay, that's how it works. I hope this is very straightforward because it makes sense, right? Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next one, okay? So that we covered a real-time subscription, live updates when cards are moved, multiple users can collaborate instantly, and no polling needed. You're gonna use basically a WebSocket, right? Polling is what I mean by like every 5 seconds, you refresh, you do it programmatically, you set a function there, and then it keeps running, and it's wasting resources. Instead, we use a WebSocket, right? Instead of electricity socket, is a WebSocket. You basically plug into the website of Supabase, and whenever something changes, you fetch the information, okay? The 4th one is called auto-generated REST APIs, all right? So let's see what it does. So this says there's no backend coding needed, full CRUD operations with TypeScript. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. Sounds familiar? Yes, that's exactly what we had for these policies, right? Delete, insert, update, select. Insert is basically create here, okay? And automatically create the API documentations. Let's see what it really means. Let's go back to the source/lib/supabase.ts. Come back here, source/supabase, library lib/supabase.ts. Remember earlier we explained that we create a client here called Supabase. We also have a Supabase browser client here that returns the browser client with the same key, okay? And then we define a database types here that basically defines what every like board, what does the board table have, what does the list table have, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so the way it works, the whole idea of auto-generated REST APIs is the following, okay? Whenever we use this thing called Supabase, which is using create client, let's find an example. Come back to Kanban board. All right, let's scroll down. By the way, sorry, this is the real-time subscription examples. You guys can keep checking them. And then the feature 4 is right here, auto-generated REST APIs, read, okay? You see that we're doing this kind of thing called await supabase.fromBoards.select star .order create at star. What is this doing? This is saying from the table boards, select everything and then order them by the time they were created in a descending order. Like the latest one should be at the top because ascending is false. For anyone who's very familiar with SQL, you're basically writing a SQL called select star from boards, order by, created at in descending order, right? If you're familiar with SQL, this is the SQL version of it. And traditionally, if we don't use automated generated API, we need to create 4 functions separately, 4 APIs separately. One API does, whenever this API is called, we're going to allow it to create data. Another one does read data. Another one does update data. The last one does delete data. You need 4 APIs to do every single one of these 4 actions. But now, instead, because of Supabase client that they very kindly defined for us right here, we are able to just use supabase.fromBoards.select star. Await supabase.fromLists select star, wherever the board ID equals the board ID that we use, and order them in position. Right? Supabase.fromCards.select everything, wherever the list that the card in will list every card that belongs to this one list. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say the list ID is for in progress. We're going to find all the cards that belong to this list and then map them in. Right? These 2 cards belong to this list. I'm going to map them in. That's what this does. Instead of writing 4 APIs, every single one of them, instead, you just be able to do all of these things, right? So instead of from, so Supabase.from is one API that you're supposed to write. Let's say if Supabase instead of .select, which is read, let's do insert. You see, we can insert this new table, this new data into boards, right? Insert this new to-do insert this new data, create a sample list. This is a sample creation. Insert them in, right? And then there are a bunch of insert here. This is like the other API you're supposed to write if you're using traditional REST API to interact with the database. But now you can use Supabase to avoid writing all these things, right? That's what it means. Super handy, trust me, super handy. You can do .delete, right? I can delete any card if I want to, right? Don't worry if you feel like this file is very complicated. If you're a beginner, try to download this code and then play around with it just like me, doing Command F and then search things like what I'm doing. Try to understand what it means. And then in your own project, what you can do is you can just select this, copy it, and then just do Command Shift L and then just paste in your own code, Command V or whatever. And then you can just say, show me how to integrate this into my own code for use case A, B, C, D. Okay, that's how you can do it. Cool. That's the 4th one, I believe. Yeah, auto-generated REST APIs. I think we covered them. I think there's an automatic API documentation, which is in Supabase. If you come here, if you go to API docs, I think that's what they meant. So if you go to tables and views, so you see there are 3 tables here: boards, cards, list. As long as you create the tables using our Supabase schema database.sql, if you copy this into your Supabase SQL editor and paste, you'll be able to get this. Okay, and you can see there's a documentation for you. If you want to select anything, select ID, select title. Right, select anything, right? Insert, and I believe delete also exists. So you have an entire documentation here. You can just do Command A and copy, and then paste into your cursor, right? and be like, hey, read this documentation. This is how we use our backend, and let's do it. Let's do it. But now I think it's more handy because you can probably use the MCP of Supabase to integrate with your code. Okay. So that was number 4, auto-generated REST API. Okay. Number 5 is called database functions and triggers. So I'll show you why it's handy. Oftentimes, whenever I update something, what I want is that I want to record when does this event happen. For instance, I want to track like who used this board, right? Like let's say I don't know. What should I say? Okay, a user might come back into this app after a month, and then suddenly they use it quite often, and you want to understand, oh, why there's a peak around let's say September for people to come back to this app, and then you realize, oh, holy shit, because there are a bunch of students using this app. Oh, that makes sense. In September, students come back to school and they start using this app again, right? You want to see when these events are happening so that it's very important for your future analytics. But traditionally, you probably need to do like, actually I prepared the example. Let me show you. Traditionally, you probably need to do something like, let me show you. Probably not this one. It's the other one, top 10 Supabase tips for vibe coders. This was the REST API example. Yes, there we go. Traditionally, you would need to do something like this, okay? Await Supabase from the cards table, update with a new title, and updated at is, you're gonna do this. New date to string. So basically you're creating an updated time manually. And as the comment says, it's very easy to forget, right? But with the function trigger, you don't need to do anything. There's a trigger in our Supabase underscore schema, database.sql. Remember, like this is for ROL's security policy. Right after that, we have the function to update the updated at timestamp. And there's a trigger to run that function. I'll explain one by one. It's very, very easy to understand, okay? So firstly, we're gonna create this function called update the updated at column. Sorry about the tongue twister, but updated at is like a column name in our database. I'll show you. Come back here, table editor. Doesn't matter what table, let's say use board, scroll, updated at, right? There's a created at, there's an updated at. We have a column. So what we're saying is that whenever this function is called, we have to return the relevant trigger that as long as there's a new update, then we're gonna use our current time. So automatically set the current timestamp and then return it. And what it does is that, let's say, okay, whenever there is a row execution on your boards table, it's gonna run this function called updated at column, and then trigger that, and then write the time into your column. So what you can do is you can copy this, come back to Supabase, come to SQL editor, click on this, paste it here, command enter to run it. Well, I already have everything, right? So after this, you can come to the sidebar, go to your, I believe it's authentication. Nope. Go to database, click on this, functions. You see we have a function here called updated at column. And this is exactly what we define in our code. New.update equals now, return new, okay? This is exactly this function, okay? And then it's returning a trigger, and that trigger will be stored here in the trigger tab. Every trigger here is relevant to a table, boards, cards, list, is running that function, all right? And you can edit every trigger. Guys, I know it's very complicated. It sounds very complicated, but in reality, you just literally tell AI and be like, hey, I want a function and the relevant triggers so that they can do A, B, C, D, E. All right. In this case, I'll just tell, help me write these like .sql files so that whenever a user is updating These tables, doesn't matter what they do. I want to update the update at column to leave the latest timestamp over there because that's important for me for future logs. Okay, simple as that. So that you don't have to rewrite everything by yourself. Okay, let's move on. I think we're done. Number 6 is called EdgeFunctions, which is also called serverless. Traditionally, you might host your own server, buy a bunch of like servers and then put it in your rooms and then run everything there. But now the server is at Supabase. Sorry, no, Supabase is a wrapper around AWS. The server is owned by AWS. Okay, so you're using a bunch of things called serverless functions. In this case, it's called EdgeFunctions. This is very important. So this is also the last one. By the way, we already covered like 80% of the use cases of Supabase. This is what's covering up the other rest of the, I don't know, 19% of the use cases. Customer server-side logic without managing servers, okay? Because servers are with Amazon. Automatic notifications when tasks are completed. External API integrations, like you can integrate with email, Slack, webhooks. So for example, do you remember like sometimes you sign up to a new app and then they just send you an email? They're probably using an EdgeFunction in their backend, right? And the reason why we need this is that we can say like, hey, we can write this in our own Next.js app. We can write it in our front end. But what happens is that because you are running a function based on some changes on the server, that access level is very high. You don't want that. You don't want to expose that to a user. Because what if there's like a very strong hacker and they have access to your keys and then they can just change things. They can send emails to a users. Okay? We don't want that. What we do want is that we want this to run in the backend. We want this to run in our server at Amazon. And we don't have to worry about it. We're using Supabase to run all these things. So the example I prepared for you is whenever I move an item to, let me use this one. Whenever I move an item to done, I want to get a notification. Okay, this is done. Or in other cases, because you see, like it is successfully triggered it. So if I move it to do, there's nothing. Okay, move it to in progress, there's nothing. But if I move it to done, I get a notification. So that means it's triggering this edge function that we defined. And then we can also like say, oh, whenever it's triggered, send an email to this person, right? Something like that. So let me show you how to use it, okay? So I created this thing called Supabase/functions, okay? And I created this thing called task completion notification, okay? And there's an index.ts. What this index.ts file does is basically like, I didn't write any of these, by the way. I used AI to write it. Feel free to use AI to describe, but you need to understand what it does. Okay, so what it does is that whenever there's a task that's completed, which means that, let's try to understand this. So there's a request.method equals options, checking a bunch of access control. I don't care. Whenever the list title is not done, not a completion, don't do anything, okay? Otherwise, send the completion notification, return success equals true, okay? And then trigger that function of send completion notification, okay? Send that notification. Anyways, so we want to trigger all of these things whenever a card has been added to the list that has title done, right? This if is saying like, if it's not done, do this. If it's done, do the following. Okay? So how did we do that? We did it by, first of all, I also use this in Kanban board. Let's just search. I think it's EdgeFunctions, right? Notification toast for EdgeFunctions. Okay. So this is sending you a notification given that. Okay. Yep. These are just like the front end stuff and the error checking. Okay. But on the back end, it's like this. So let's go back to Supabase. All right. Come to Supabase. Come to the sidebar here. You see there's a thing called EdgeFunction. Click into it. You see I have my sidebar, sorry. I have my function here, right? It was created an hour ago when I was preparing for this video. What you can do is that you can click on deploy a new function via editor, and you see like there's an index.ts. That's exactly what I had here, all right? I just like copy this whole thing, put it back in, click on deploy function, and you can edit the function name. I didn't edit it now, it's called bright function, right? All right, come back here, refresh it. Yeah, the two of them. And then you just need to tell your AI and be like, hey, I have this edge function defined on Supabase. Help me implement them here. Okay, help me implement them here. And then you're like using your backend to send notifications instead of exposing these information to the front end for a user. All right. Guys, I think that's it. I think that's like that's most of the stuff I wanted to show for this. Again, feel free to come to this GitHub, yt-supabase-tips-kanban. Click here, copy this, and come back to your terminal, right? Just do like git clone and paste that here. That's all you need to do, okay? I won't do that again here. And then feel free to deploy it to Vercel. I think this video is already too long. I won't do that here. And for login, go back to my previous video. You'll see a bunch of examples of how to connect your Supabase with your Google login or email login. And last but not least, if you want to deploy a full stack application, feel free to go to launch-mvp.seanchen.io. I prepared a template over here in one of my previous videos, which has got quite a lot of popularity. 724 stars right now. Guys, help me to hit 1,000. Thanks. Cool. I hope this is helpful. I hope you have learned something from this video. And I would say all these use cases that I showed you is yt.supabase tips.kanban. These top 6 use cases are covering, I would say, 95% of the cases where I'm going to use Supabase for. Authentication, RowLevel security, real-time subscription, automatically using some REST APIs. You don't have to rewrite everything for updating your tables, create, read, update, delete. And then some functions or triggers that you can use to update your table, like updated at timestamp. And last but not least, have an edge function that's going to run some logic on the back end so that you're not exposing some secrets keys to your front end. Okay. Spend some time on it. Don't worry about it if you didn't come from a computer science background or technical background. I learned all of these things by myself. You have AI, you can do this. Try to use this GitHub, try to use Cursor, talk to your ChatGPT, talk to your Claude, talk to your whatever, and you can do it. Cool. Thanks a lot. I hope this is helpful. Peace. Thanks.